Hello, everyone, and welcome to the State of Salesforce Implementations, where we discuss burning issues related to implementations in the Salesforce ecosystem. My name is Lars Malmqvist. I'm a Salesforce CTA and author of the books Salesforce Anti-Patterns and Architecting AI Solutions on Salesforce. And with me today, I have Christian.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christian Jorgensen. I am a solution architect at Wake. I advise and challenge organizations on planning, orchestrating, and scaling their Salesforce implementations and programs. I'm also the author of the Salesforce End-to-End Implementation Handbook. And with me, also Ines. Hello.
Yes, my name is Ines, a Salesforce MVP Hall of Fame. And what I do is help organizations to reduce waste of time, of effort, of finance, materials, energy. So talk to me about Agile, Salesforce, marketing, circular economy, climate, biomimicry, even permaculture. We also have in the call.
Hiya, my name's Francis Pinder, and I'm founder of admin2architect.com, where I train the next generation of Salesforce admins and developers to become architects. And I've trained over 130,000 people in Salesforce as an admin so far, which is kind of exciting. I'm also host of Salesforce Posse podcast, as well as a MVP Hall of Famer, and I haven't written a book, unlike everybody else. So, on this session today, Lars, who are we going to be talking to?
So, today we're talking about multi-cloud Salesforce programs, and the person we've got to talk about this is Sanny Hammarberg, who is the person in the world I think knows most about this topic. He has run many multi-cloud Salesforce programs for companies such as Volvo, and I've personally had the chance of working with him at my previous job in Accenture for several years on some of the largest multi-cloud programs in the Nordics. Today we are joined by Sanny Hammarberg, who is the VP of Technology and Platforms at Frog, which is a design agency that's part of Capgemini Invent. He is also one of the people in Scandinavia who has run the most large-scale Salesforce implementations, both at Accenture and previously at Volvo Cars. So he knows everything about how to run large Salesforce programs, which is why we've got him on today. So, Sanny, sort of just to kick things off, how is it different running a large multi-cloud Salesforce program compared to sort of traditional single cloud implementations?
Well, I think, first of all, thanks, Lars. I think, again, there's a lot of experienced people out there in the market. So, but I'm happy to be here. But I think from my perspective, I think going multi-cloud, but also going to a larger transformation, there's a lot more things to handle. There's a lot of, most of the time, parallel work streams. There's integrations, both between clouds and legacy platforms. And I think there's a lot of different threads that you need to really keep a close governance on. But you also then, to me, you really, really need to have a target state and a transformation. So I think it's really about making sure that you get a lot of people that are working in most of the cases parallel work streams towards one single goal. And I think that is definitely one of the bigger challenges in running a large scale multi-cloud transformation.
So, I mean, the next question is then obvious. Like, how do you govern multiple work streams in parallel and get them to work towards a common goal? What's the key tips and tricks?
Well, I think if I'm going to start, I know we have a great group of people here with a lot of experience, but if I'm going to start, I think it is about setting a close and a clear vision and a goal, driving it together, business and IT. And I think my success criteria is making sure that the Salesforce implementation really is a business transformation and not really an IT project. So you really get business and IT working together, setting up metrics early on in your transformation, really knowing where you're heading and being clear on communicating that. And I think communication cannot be understated. I think it's so important to communicate both externally and internally in large programs where you're heading, because if people know where they're heading, there's a lot easier to figure out if you're going the wrong way. Then I think, in essence, I think most programs that are run these days are run in some kind of agile fashion. So you need quite strong governance, both when it comes to architectural, but then also towards more processes. And usually I try to recommend like service design, or at least knowing how you document and running your processes, and really knowing where how you share those. And then, of course, ceremonies, really close control of your ceremonies and governance.
I'd be interested to find out about different structures that you've seen over the years of how to group and align those delivery teams. So you talked about business and IT. There are many different sort of ways that you can compose so that you can deliver value. I'm interested to see what you've seen, what worked well.
Well, I think from my perspective, what's worked well is really the I would say almost call it co-locating, or at least now virtually co-locating the teams, including like if you have a Scrum team or Agile teams, that you actually also embed business knowledge in there, and you embed integration knowledge into your Agile teams. I think again, I've been doing CRM transformations and CRM programs since Siebel days, when everything was waterfall, and you wrote a 100-page spec, and that was what you delivered over the course of 2 years, and then you were done. And so I think moving to Agile, which I think is or some kind of at least structured Agile version, is much more successful. You can keep closer pace to your business transformation, business changes that are happening along the way of a large scale program and transformation. But I also think it's coming back to setting the goals. You really need to make sure that everybody knows where you're heading. And then I think I'm not a huge SAFe evangelist in that sense, but I do think some kind of scaled Agile where your different work streams meet on a fairly regular basis to do a check-in on where are they in progress, and then you also make sure that you have some kind of retrospects, business testing, and making sure that everybody up until the end users preferably gets to see your progress, so that you're not losing track. Not sure if I answered your question completely there, Ines, but
yeah, I mean, I guess, when you talk about like different streams, and I don't know about SAFe. I personally think SAFe, if you go by the book, is very unsafe. Yeah. But so, for example, right, more traditional way to organize deliveries by departments, right? So you have HR here, marketing over there, this, that, and the other, right? Another way to look at it is by functionality. Another way to look at it is by depends on which kind of technology that you touch. So I just wonder, what sort of like compartmentalized bits you've seen in terms of delivering the value, and maybe how you ensure that complex program sort of end up as a coherent whole.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I've seen both looking more on end user functionality setups. So what is kind of a stack that delivers towards an end user value. And then, of course, I've seen setups more related to technology. I don't think, to be honest, I haven't really seen either of these being more successful than the other. I think the most important part has more or less been the fact that you get to, I would call it, reduce the administration and the need for alignment, but still keeping it to kind of making sure that everybody's moving towards the same goal. So again, seeing really poorly implemented SAFe structures where developers are spending 40 to 50% of their time in alignment meetings. Nobody's happy compared to, but then again, not not having it also means, of course, then something that Lars and I might have experienced. One track goes off to the right side and the other track goes off to the left side. And then, of course, in the end, you don't have an end-to-end workflow that works for the end user. So it's a balance. And I can't really say with my experience that like feature or end user product or technology has been more or less successful than the other, unfortunately. It's been much more about the people and the governance you put around it.
Perhaps related to that, I'd be curious to hear your take on, the first rule of scaling is don't. So in your opinion, when do you decide to go from being one team with, let's say, one product owner to being multiple teams, and then deciding consciously the overhead is worth it for these different reasons, right?
Well, I think that to do it in one product team is of course, it comes down to the mass and material. How much do you need to get done? I think looking at what I did at Volvo Cars, I think our SAFE program was 140 people. Of course, that cannot be led by one product owner. It's an impossibility. We had Service Cloud, Sales Cloud, Marketing Cloud as well. So to me, it's really about what you need to get done. Of course, if you can do it in one team and during a longer period of time, potentially, maybe that is preferred. But I don't have really that much experience with running one team projects, unfortunately.
So, what do you think what are the kind of the top risks that you'd find when scaling that to kind of mitigate from or keep an eye out for?
Well, I think one risk is always, and coming back maybe to technology, but integrations and how do you handle integrations? I think that's also the area where I've seen the most issues over time. How do you handle integrations? Do you embed it in the different product teams? Do you have your own kind of integration squad somewhere? What are they doing? A lot of projects that I've seen have underestimated the technical complexity around integrations, especially back-end integrations and not cloud-to-cloud integrations. So that is definitely one area to both keep an eye on. So who is giving kind of the backlog and who is giving the priority to the integration team? How do you make sure that scales towards your different, let's call them feature teams or whatever you're building, so that they can test end-to-end products without being stuck without integrations, etc. So the priority around integrations is definitely, especially in large-scale programs that I've been running, always been most probably the highest risk. The other is, as I mentioned, that too little kind of focus on the end-to-end process, leading to product teams building snippets of an end-to-end process that don't fit together. And then you have to spend a lot of time in the end either rebuilding or patching things up. And I think you're laughing, Raj, but it's more than one project I've seen that in for sure. And here I think the most important thing is, of course, to involve the end users, the business users, as much as possible, and really make sure that happens. It's easy to, let's crank on. We're behind schedule, whatever. Let's continue developing, and we'll fix it in the end. Usually not a wise idea in my mind, but rather make sure you do those retrospects, make sure you do those end user testings during the course of a long program.
So kind of going on from the kind of the managing risk, I suppose, it's kind of like how do you, and you've talked about like the retrospectives and the communication between the teams, but obviously as these Scrum teams increase, then you're going to have, problems in communicating across them. So how have you seen, challenges in that and tips to kind of how to resolve those kind of issues of scaling communication?
Well, it's an obvious problem, especially in larger scale, like 100-man programs for sure. I think it might be a dull or boring answer, but again, getting people to know each other, actually meeting physically, especially in this distributed digital world, but having people know each other so that they know who to contact, who is responsible for what, having a bit of fun. Again, it's usually, it helps a lot to know the people that you're driving a program with. And then I think the second topic is actually making sure that everybody is reasonably upskilled on Salesforce. It makes people be able to talk about things with the same vocabulary, understanding what people are saying. You don't get that many misunderstandings if you at least have the basic knowledge of the terminology around the platform and a good level of knowledge about what the platform can and cannot do, at least from scratch. So I think upskilling everyone on the basis of Salesforce, and then making sure that you know each other.
So, I mean, one of the things that we've talked about several times on this series is whether there is a tension between sort of, especially as you scale a program, is there a tension between wanting to control it, having defined business goals, increasingly wanting, guarantees for ROI, and staying as agile as you can and giving the teams autonomy to actually execute?
Yes, of course. And I think in a lot of cases, at least in this large scale, you are to a degree replacing something as well. So of course, it's one thing if you do a greenfield where agility and you can really rebuild everything. But in a lot of programs, especially where I've been working, it's been around replacing old CRM solutions, e-commerce. And then, of course, and then you're going out to market, you're going straight to customers. There's a limited area of innovation in that sense, or at least a limited area of being able to put out an MVP in some spaces. There, of course, then you're by nature, I would say, limiting the agility because you are to a level kind of working agile towards a reasonably defined waterfall goal. And with that and with scale, then yes, we have this target to meet, and we have in some programs, or at least in some businesses, you also set a deadline. There's an end of life on your traditional or your older CRM platform, where you are limiting, I would say, the agility, and with that, you're also limiting the innovation. So of course, it would be better to have, let's say, the agile mindset reach all the way up to company executives and really have that understanding. But I also understand the position, of course, of CIO, CEO, where saying we have this amount of funding and we need to do this work and we need to replace this system by a specific date. So that is definitely a balance, and that's where I would call it scaling agile in that kind of context isn't, of course, true agile in the sense.
So are you seeing these kind of big corporates or big companies are still doing these kind of big programs? Or is there a trend to the bigger programs of work, or is it they're trying to do smaller pieces of work and iterating on it? I don't know. Yeah. Well, obviously, it's a bit of a challenge. You're replacing a system. It could have lots of tentacles, so it becomes a new program. But, is there an approach there? Are you seeing what you're seeing in the market at the moment?
I think there's still a balance. I think a lot of larger organizations as well have gone through an agile transformation, and I think they are aware of it. They are somewhere along a journey of a product orientation or an agile journey. They want to do smaller things, but they still have especially budgeting processes that are on a yearly basis. They still have most of the companies that are the larger companies still have more 12 or budget cycles that are 12 months-ish. Meaning, of course, that they are, in a sense, limiting the possibility to be truly agile. And then, of course, if you are in the replacement situation still, of course, many companies have, then I think you are, we still see those requests. They are fewer and many want to do that more agile, but it is, of course, also fairly complex if you are in 4 or 5 to 20 different markets and you're replacing an old civil system by a certain date, or you have to extend for a full year with all the costs that are coming. It's a balance. But I think the ambition is there, but I'm not sure the entire ecosystem and the entire corporate setup has been shifted, even in the companies that are saying that they are fairly far away or further along in the Agile journey.
That's interesting, because you talk about Agile transformation. Transformation is such a heavy word, maybe evolution. But sounds like that is only tech delivery approach, leaving aside other departments, and the ability to flex and be adaptive with the buckets that you put money on, for example, it can unblock a lot of issues. So is that the state of affairs? Like, doesn't go beyond just Salesforce delivery teams? It's just me, or?
Sorry, I'm not sure if I fully got but the question there.
Yeah, that's fine. So I wonder if you, sounds like to me that the transformation experience have been being more agile around Salesforce delivery teams, and it doesn't really span beyond that to other departments. You mentioned finance, and when you are able to adapt rapidly across different departments, right? Teams can go fast, real fast. But if the rest of the organization doesn't keep up the pace, it's sort of, you're shooting yourself in the foot. So am I reading that right? Have you seen this expanding to other departments? How's that look?
No, I definitely see it expanding to other departments like HR, finance, in the sense that they want to run their change in a more agile fashion. But I think it's not maybe reached the entire corporate structure and setups yet in a lot of companies that we work with or that I work with. Also, of course, working with a lot of manufacturing companies that have, 3-year cycle to deliver a new product, like a truck or a car. They are, if when they're trying to be agile, of course, their financing setups are still fairly. So even if they've gone a long way in an agile journey internally and are really working in more or less self-organizing teams, and in those areas, there might still be financing setups that are hindering them from being completely agile in that sense. That is my experience so far, and of course I work across a lot of different industries, but I'm more experience in manufacturing, automotive, a little bit of life science, energies, and utilities.
It's almost like the organization is going based on the slowest team almost, or the least mature team, right? Agile team, and having to keep that going until they've migrated as well, or transformed, or matured.
Yeah, potentially. I think, but I also think, again, a lot of these companies, they of course are they're stock listed companies. They need to have a little bit of transparency in their or they have the transparency in their financial reporting. There's a lot of layers on top, of course, that needs to be handled, and of course there's a transformation that is needed all the way up to the top CEOs, in that sense that you need to relinquish quite a lot of your control, or at least your kind of felt control, if you want to really have an agile organization around you. That is my feeling, at least, that you need to be able to trust and have a lot more trust in your organization, and it's hard to set up deadlines, metrics on a quarterly basis, etc., on deliveries. It's possible, but it's harder. And I think there's a transformation that really, and coming back to Ines, that truly is a transformation, I think, on transforming your entire organization. And I think a lot of companies are doing really, really good improvements or changes in this, also impacting the Salesforce programs that I've been engaged in. But in a lot of the experience I still have is that you do get, or the client or the project has a set limit of budget. It has a set goal, And then how we get there is potentially there's more freedom, but it needs to reach a certain goal and preferably within a certain budget. And that's when I'm referring to maybe waterfall agile. That is the true, to me, that's the true kind of way of working waterfall agile. You know where you need to head because you need to replace a old CRM system in 20 markets. And you know that you have X amount of euros to do that.
Yeah, I don't want to hold the conversation very much, but that's, I think, perhaps one of the misconceptions, because you can have, so in a waterfall model, you end up flexing your time, your money, your scope, your quality, right? You try not to, but that's what the results are. Instead, if you are looking at shorter time spans of delivering value that can be used throughout, what you are setting is time and budget and quality. And then what you flex is how you get there. So in a sense, in my mind, it's more transparent than any other way, in a way that you can have control, because this is the money that we're going to set to do. This is the time because we have a side campaign or whatever it is to it. I wonder how you look at, you talked about metrics and you talk about governance and you talk about keeping it lean, right? So, that sort of fine line of control and trust. What sort of metrics do you look at? How you look at the lean sort of governance?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. I think that is very situationally adapted. But I think, of course, key topic to discuss is how much time do your kind of really productive resources like developers, architects, etc., spend outside of their core business or kind of what they really and that's unfortunately a metric that is too seldomly reviewed. Unfortunately, so I think that is when you talk about like running the actual project, that is to me one of the core metrics. So how much time do we spend actually delivering or creating value, and how much time do you spend in alignment meetings and ceremonies that take you away from that work. Then, of course, I think when I speak about metrics, I'm more speaking maybe around business values, business metrics, really making sure that you know what is the outcome from a business perspective, and that is a metric that's on everybody's, I'll call it retina. So that everybody really has that as the next step. Coming back to value and delivering value, it is really about how do we get towards better business metrics and not around story points or budget in that sense, but really how do we deliver business value in our program instead of delivering and just measuring story points, velocity, number of heads, etc., which is traditional program management metrics.
Definitely, couldn't agree more. Yeah, I think people get confused. They kind of get lost in the what you're doing and pushing out these stories and actually lose sight on actually we're trying to increase win rate, we're kind of decrease this, or get what's the overall business value we're actually trying to succeed from this, and measuring the difference after you've has been implemented really, and the success from that. So I've got a question around, especially when you get larger projects, you get a lot more vendors involved, and how do you manage kind of a multi-vendor program, and how do you the different ways of working and alignment and what are the kind of key problems and best practices you see in kind of managing kind of a multi-vendor program?
Well, to me, maybe the dull answer here is trust. Again, I've been on the client side as Lars presented, but I've also been of course on the more SI vendor side. But I think it to me it really is around this is a people business, and especially around the vendor side, and being able to work and collaborate towards, I would call it at this point, of course, the client's best interests, regardless if the person comes from vendor 1, 2, or 3. And it's around building that, to me, building that culture and being able to live that culture. So trust by far is to me the most important part here. Professionalism, of course, I try to avoid the internal competition. I know that some clients or some areas, they would like, okay, we have 2 or 3 different product teams. Let's see who's delivering most story points. To me, it's counterproductive, and it will only lead to internal debate and discussions and some kind of internal competitions that has no, again, business value add. So it's much more important that the people that you have around you, making sure that you trust them, making sure that they are trustworthy and actually looking at your best interest instead of their own. And I think we are fortunate. I think the Salesforce ecosystem is a very generous ecosystem. It is a lot of trust. I think they've built up a good collaborative environment, and I've been part of both a client as well as a vendor in multi-vendor setups. And to be honest, I haven't really had that many concerns. I think we are fortunate in that sense that the Salesforce ecosystem is very, I would call it competitive yet friendly. I don't know if you agree, Christian. You knowing and Lars, of course, also being in the business for a long time. But...
No, I actually really agree with that sentiment. Right? My previous experience was a long time in the Microsoft ecosystem, and comparatively speaking, I have found that the Salesforce ecosystem is a lot more open, it's a lot more collaborative, and there's a lot more internal support, also sort of across partners. And that is, I think that's a real thing they've done. I mean, you shouldn't overstate it, right? It can get a little bit overstated sometimes, but I think it is also real, right? There is something there that you haven't seen.
Competitors almost,
absolutely.
They kind of support each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Sanny, I wonder, so we talked a bit about the scenario where there is a legacy CRM that has an end of life, and there's a program to work towards that target date. What about afterwards? What do you see happening with programs? Do they then just go into operations and stuff? Or how do you see those programs afterwards? Because that would seem a bit less agile-ish if it were we do a program, and then what happens next, right?
Well, I would unfortunately could I say yes. I think they end up in less focus in some of the clients and some of the work, and also work I've seen at my previous employer at Volvo. It ends up being product teams, of course, or some kind of product teams set up, working towards backlog goals in a more of a maintenance setup. Of course, and hopefully you bring in a little bit of this sense of innovation, either through innovation sprints or other things. But in some cases, I've seen they end up being kind of more or less downscaled to fairly small, take care of the next release and do a very little work. Similar to of course, earlier CRM implementations and CRM rollouts to markets, where most markets say, yes, we got this new shiny tool, but now nobody's giving us like upgrades or the next features that we really want. So my wish here is, of course, that once you've launched, you continue to really make sure that you continue to develop your product. And I'm sure there are companies as well out there that are doing that in really good fashion. But in some cases, I'm afraid it also ends up being more of a keep the lights on maintenance, just upgrading for the 3 Salesforce releases per year and making sure it still fits, so to say. But in most agile organizations, at least, it's what I've seen. It's run by product teams or some kind of technology product teams that are responsible for the marketing cloud or service cloud, and there's a small team that are handling CR related backlog work.
So
It makes me think about resilience of the system that we create. And you talk about, at the end of the day, it's humans, it's people, it's the communications within. So how do you embody resilience throughout, or how can you try when it does succeed? What does that look like?
Well, to me, I think it is still around, and I think, again, most companies that we work with and I work with, they rally around the transformation, the change, and a little bit less than around the maintenance or the upkeep or the next phase. But here, I think it is important to really make sure that you continue setting stretch goals. You continue setting, like, what's the next thing? How can we still be relevant to our customers? Because, of course, a lot of these replacement programs, they come to life because you haven't really been investing enough in what you had. Of course, there are some cases where it really is technology driven, but in a lot of cases, of course, it has been around. You invest in some new project and you put a lot of money in that. Then you move to the next project, but you forget what you already had. And then you need to make a leap. Whereas where you do a technology leap, or whether you do a transformation in that sense, I think it's again coming back to maybe resilience, but at least I think it's most in many cases, I think it's more economically easy to justify continue investing, so you don't need to make that next leap, at least not to the foreseeable future. Resilience, again, yes, this is where I think, and coming back to training or learning Salesforce, the clients that we work with should really can take ownership and really continue understanding what's happening in this ecosystem. What are the new products that would be relevant for me? Continue to go to different Salesforce events, continue to talking with other clients that are using Salesforce instead of, okay, our project is closed, let's do something. It's like you have so many possibilities if you continue to try to be relevant, continue to listen to it, continue to go to Dreamforce or listen into the webinars and staying in the know of the ecosystem and staying in the know of what Salesforce is doing. Then, yes, you can also build that, like, what's our next goal? How do we build resilience around what we have developed? It's by making it, to me, grow and stay relevant. And you need a lot of internal champions, and they need to know what they can get out of the product or from the business perspective. So I think that's the most important thing. You need to make sure you continue to champion the change, and you don't get passive or just sit around administrating.
Yeah, avoiding stale by continuous improvement. It's a good mantra.
So can I just follow up on this one? Because I think I'm seeing a trend that, actually when we're dealing with these programs, and after a while, we want to do a new change program of some sort. And actually our legacy system is now Salesforce, because we've already done the implementation, right? And we haven't quite invested as we should. So actually we have a brownfield environment. We want to add some of these new things that we've seen at Dreamforce. And now we're doing it on top of a brownfield Salesforce system. Does that change things? Or is it, the same as if it had been Siebel?
No, I actually think it changes things. It's, of course, depending on how mature you are yourself. But coming back then to have you trained your organization, do you know Salesforce internally so that you kind of figure out what you can and cannot get out of it? And unfortunately, and I think this is something that a lot of us in the industry are seeing right now, is, of course, that we're getting questions, have we implemented it in the right, are we getting the best out of our implementation? And I think, unfortunately, a lot of companies that move to cloud-based CRM solutions, be it Salesforce or something else, but maybe especially Salesforce in that sense, is unfortunately they didn't think transformation in many cases when they went to and did their initial implementation. A lot of companies that are addressing and that I'm speaking to right now maybe made more of an IT project out of a Salesforce implementation, trying to build their legacy processes into a new technology tool, which at this point now means that, all right, are we actually getting the value out of it? Are we getting the best out of our implementation? And they're in some cases also fairly hindered in innovation. They're fairly hindered in being fast because of the sense that they've done so much customization, and they've done a lot of implementing what they used to have in Salesforce instead of actually doing, all right, we are now implementing a new technology, but let's also make sure that we change our processes, our ways of working, and really making a business shift.
Yeah.
And I think that coming back, I think the ones that did the business shift are much better equipped to meet and be innovative with the new features. And the ones that implemented Siebel processes into Salesforce have a lot of work in just keeping up maintenance, etc.
The trap of the lift and shift.
Yes.
And also, this is why I've always, I think we said it before in the other talks, that, you know, the business architecture side, the whole business change piece always seems to be kind of missing almost, which I think now is changing in the Salesforce world more, which is good. But yeah, missing that, you know, it's always been a little bit more IT driven, I suppose, than Salesforce should, in my opinion, because it is a business system. You know, it should be driven by the business, right? And that business change and embracing that new, you know, new cloud technologies. So on that, are you seeing that actually companies, when we're looking at these bigger programs of work and these kind of multi-cloud or larger pieces of work, is it multi-cloud? Is it kind of Salesforce there, and you've got Azure or AWS or some other, you know, other clouds that are part of that program of work? Or is it still very much, they bought into Salesforce and it is Salesforce Marketing Cloud, whatever it may be, analytics cloud, you know, all within that program?
I think it's it's quite different, to be honest, and in a lot of clients, it's of course some kind of best practice or a little bit of a mix. I think there's few wall-to-wall Salesforce implementations that aren't also kind of, and even the ones that are heavy on Salesforce are still using some other cloud technologies for potentially e-commerce or the other areas. So I don't really see like wall to wall, but I still think I see it's fairly common with 3-4 different cloud technologies, experience, core, marketing and service, or some kind of mix of that I still think is fairly common. And of course, again, I when I was with Volvo, we started with Marketing Cloud and Sales Cloud they weren't even integrated, didn't even have this more or less the same data model and the basis. So now, of course, you get more free because I think the clouds are closer connected than it was maybe 16, 17 that time.
So if you're an aspiring architect or somebody wanting to work on these bigger programs of work, do you see that there's value in learning even kind of a high level kind of multi-cloud architecture or different types of clouds, or just focusing in on just being good at Salesforce?
Ooh, that is a tough question, especially for me, who's again, I might not be qualified to answer on the architecture. Yeah. But I think, of course, to really bring the business value in a high level client discussion or understanding how to solve really complex problems, I think understanding technology also around Salesforce will definitely be a benefit. You will more or less always have some kind of ERP integration and solution, of course, production. I think the short answer is it's better to know more, of course, always. But maybe to a balance. But I think in that case, it's probably a space for both the more really, really strong Salesforce only architects in some cases, and in some cases, more of the enterprise full ecosystem So, of course, some clients that we work with, they have really, really strong enterprise architects that knows all of their systems and all of the integrations and are really good at being more broad in technology, where then I think if we're working in the Salesforce ecosystem, really knowing how Salesforce can connect to that, but really also knowing how you can get the best out of a multi-cloud Salesforce implementation is such a value add. Again, working with Lars in some of the work that we immensely valuable to have someone with that broad skill set, especially around the product, but also the entire ecosystem. So.
Yeah, and I think also it comes back to that kind of risk, what you're saying right at the beginning of the integrations, right? If you've got that picture or even a high level of how these different cloud infrastructures can connect, then you're alleviating some of that risk, hopefully.
So, following up on a different area of skills, you've mentioned a few times how important it is for the business to have Salesforce knowledge and how important it is to have champions within the business that sort of know about Salesforce and can help drive development forward. I have sometimes found it very difficult to get people to do that and buy into that. Do you have some tips and tricks on how to get people motivated to learn?
I think Salesforce probably has one of the best, let's say, free trainings, and I think they're really good in advertising it in their different kind of channels, of course. I think, but what we shifted, especially at Volvo, when I was more on the client side, was really to make sure that the program was driven from business, and program management was dedicated from let's say the lines of business within sales, marketing, and service, and leading by example from the leadership in the different business areas. So I did at that time, I think it was called ADM 201, or kind of just and actually it made sure that a lot of our VP level people actually did trailheads and started putting up competitions around trailhead badges, etc. So I think it really is about leading with example and trying then to kind of involve business. But here I agree with you, Lars. It's usually in these kind of programs, it's a bottleneck to get the attention and really get the people involved in the first place. Especially if the program is started from more of an IT angle, we're going to replace the database because it's obsolete or whatever. Then the program starts from more of an IT replacement angle. Then it's really hard to pull in the business resources after you've set the agenda. Driving it from the business side, leading it with example from we're gonna less churn, more services created towards our customers, transforming. It's like coming back to what are we trying to achieve from a business side, and then leading with example from leadership, and then because it's really, to me, it's fun. I enjoy doing training. I still do them occasionally from just the sake. And there's so much out there that you can do learning on. So it's about getting people on board, because then I think it actually will probably solve itself if you actually start getting the ball rolling. Maybe not a clear answer, because it's a really it is a really complex issue, and especially, of course, with people being super busy in their different line roles already, getting dedicated 10% into the program, and then you're supposed to change the entire sales process with 10% of your time. That's tough. And then you're supposed to learn Salesforce as well.
Yeah. Yep. That's you see that.
Unfortunately, you do see that, and I think that is then again coming back to what you mentioned, Francis. That then it ends up being just for the sake of the effort put in. It ends up being a lift and shift because that's the easiest. You take your old process and you re-implement it in a new tool because you don't have time or focus to really rethink it and really review it. So that is probably still one of the bigger mistakes, I think, in any Salesforce program, is the fact that you don't put in enough time in, I would call it both upfront, but also during the program, looking at service design, designing your processes, really looking at what are we trying to achieve from a sales, marketing, service, process, and end user and an employee perspective. Once you sort that, then you start doing the technical part, not the other way around.
I think it's also that kind of the balance of that. How do you build flexibility or into those processes, or how, the rigidity of the process and when that's important at certain parts. Which also could help you speed up your project as well.
It helps you speed up your project. It reduces your maintenance over time, of course, and it gives you more flexibility down the line when you're done, because you've stayed closer to core or whatever but yes. So putting that effort in is so important.
Perfect. I think this is a good time to wrap. Then thank you very much, Sanny.
No, thank you. It was fun.
It's cool.
I can think about this for a long time.
Yeah, that's usually the case. Yeah.